Aloha everyone, and welcome back to Awakening to the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle. Today I have the beautiful Miss Krista King here with me from Composed Nutrition. Welcome, Krista. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
And I'm just going to read a little bit about your bio to get everyone familiar with you who doesn't already know you. Miss Krista King is a registered dietitian nutritionist, integrative and functional certified nutrition practitioner, and holistic health expert. Through her online practice, Composed Nutrition, she provides virtual nutrition coaching courses and resources to heal your hormones, digestion, and anxiety naturally. She specializes in women's health using a holistic approach for PCOS, endometriosis, PMS, and fertility. Yay. Okay, so I just want to clarify for people who don't know what PCOS is. That's polycystic ovarian syndrome, correct?
Correct, yes.
And could you just explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So PCOS is one of the common hormone-related conditions that a lot of women experience. Up to 10% of women actually can experience PCOS. And so there are 3 diagnostic criteria for it, and having 2 out of the 3. So one is elevated androgen levels. So that would be like our testosterone or DHEA are 2 of our types of hormones. Having polycystic ovaries on an ultrasound, that would be something you would get done with your doctor. And then third, irregular menstrual cycles or lack of ovulation. So if you have 2 out of the 3 of those, that could qualify you for a PCOS diagnosis. And what that can kind of look like in the body is you could have some struggles with your weight, possibly acne, hair loss. And so some of these types of symptoms, blood sugar balance and irregularities is really tied in as one of the root causes for that as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about PCOS and what it can show up like in the body.
Thank you. So it's a syndrome. I'm wondering if, like, how that differs from, or if it differs from just having a cyst on your ovary. Is that?
It is different, yes.
Okay.
So an ovarian cyst is different than polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the cysts that they are looking at on the ultrasound, it's almost like there's on the follicle, which is where your egg is released, it's like they're like little tiny cysts, as opposed to an ovarian cyst would be kind of more characterized by some pain. And so pain is not a symptom of PCOS. So if there is menstrual pain going on and you either have or suspect PCOS, then likely there is something else driving that period pain.
Okay. So you would have to think about the symptoms that you mentioned previously.
Yes.
That, because pain wouldn't necessarily be, even though it could still happen, right? You could still have painful periods. It's just not
absolutely right driver. Yeah, the pain would be driven by something else besides the driver for the PCOS. So what that means is when I see period pain, often that is linked to an imbalance in our estrogen and progesterone levels. So our estrogen governs the first half of our menstrual cycle. It is what helps to build up the uterine lining up until ovulation. And then once we ovulate, and we have to ovulate in order for our progesterone to be released. So that is our hormone that governs the second half of the menstrual cycle. And so if we're not ovulating, and we're not going to be producing progesterone, or stress can really interfere with our delicate hormone system. And so if we have imbalances in our estrogen and progesterone, that can drive period pain, as well as something called prostaglandins. So what those are our body releases those right before our periods in order to help the uterine lining contract and shed, and the shedding of the lining, that is our period. And those can get a bit out of balance if we're not getting enough of our omega-3s, so our omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in best sources in our fish, things like salmon and sardines. And so if we're not eating a lot of those, then potentially an omega-3 or a fish oil supplement could be really helpful with the period pain.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I was just kind of curious because, I mean, as far as I know, I have a pretty healthy cycle right now. It used to not be healthy, which is what brought me onto this path myself. And it was a long time ago, but around the age of like 16 or something, I didn't have, well, I wasn't conscious of symptoms necessarily, but I ended up having a cyst on one of my ovaries that was the size of a grapefruit.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I didn't have any indication of it. The only reason that I even knew about it was because I got a pelvic exam, and the doctor who was doing the exam thought that I was pregnant because she felt such a large mass there, and I wasn't. And yeah, it's just very interesting how there can be things happening inside of us that we don't know about unless we get some form of test or exam done. That being said, I wasn't nearly as conscious at that part of my life, so there could have been signals and symptoms that I just wasn't aware of, but I just found that fascinating that something could grow to the size of a grapefruit in my abdomen and
not know. Yeah.
Thankfully, it was just one cyst that I was able to have removed. EO. You know, he's been interrupting quite a few of these interviews, my little kitten, but what can you do with babies? Okay, so thank you for that. Also, I would love to have you share a little bit about your own journey and what brought you into this line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely been an evolution moving into the women's health space. I've always been passionate about preventative health and getting to the root of our health imbalances and various conditions. And so that was really driven by losing my mom at age 18. And so at that time, she really started getting into what was available in the holistic health world at that time, which it has really exploded in the last 10 years. So it was about 2009 when she passed. So the kind of the few years before that. So kind of the mid 2000s of, what would be available then for holistic health. And so really she was what drove me, or drove the passion that I found for really trying to get to the root of what is driving these various conditions that we're experiencing. And that led me to become a dietitian, because at that time, that was really the path that was available for nutrition. There weren't as many, holistic programs then. And I'm really grateful for the conventional training, because now with the additional kind of functional integrative approach, holistic approach, I can really use this really well-rounded holistic approach to understand these conditions that we're seeing today. And so after that, kind of entered into, a dietitian job. I worked in home health, doing in-home diabetes counseling for a short while, and then was in the corporate wellness space, but always have that passion for the preventative health and wanting to find answers. I've always been wanting to, uncover the root of what is going on with our health, because so many of us are, I can't say I was really even like healthy at that time, like you were explaining with your experience, I didn't know, you said I didn't know I had this grapefruit sized thing inside of me. I didn't realize that the period symptoms I was experiencing were, a sign of various imbalances, because we're taught that these things are normal, and they're definitely common, but they're not normal. But we're not taught what the other way, or how to decode what our bodies are trying to speak to us through these symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just came to a point where I was in my previous position. It was just time to move into the practice I wanted to create, which definitely evolved into the women's health and hormones space, because as I was peeling back the layers of all of my clients' health stories and just looking to see what are these kind of common root causes, it always was coming back to the hormone system and our nervous system. And, it wasn't just the commonalities in the physical body, but asking these questions of what led up to these imbalances. And so it's this kind of fascinating integration of looking at how have the things that we have gone through in life affected our nervous systems, which affect our hormones, and it's all connected. And so it's this kind of progression into these chronic sort of symptoms and conditions that we're seeing today. We can't just say that today I have this and then I need to fix it by doing this. We really need to look at the why and how did this lead to where it is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I can only imagine the healing journey of losing your mom at such a young age. And it's understandable how you could have such a powerful drive and a passion coming out of something like that. I think it's really incredible when we see people who take some form of trauma or tragedy in their life and they use that as fuel to better themselves and birth creations into the world that help, the collective as a whole. I think that's one of the gifts that can come out of hardship, if we're really able to embark on that healing journey and sort of alchemize the pain within ourselves and create something beautiful. So I just want you to know that I have a lot of respect for you for pursuing this path and being so focused and passionate about it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And I just have to share that I have a very a similar passion as you. I have not lost my mom like you have, but there was a very distinct point in my journey when it was like I just woke up and my eyes were so wide to the state of the world, especially in this country, and how sick so many of us are. And it was probably around 10 years ago when I personally feel like cancer was really starting to grow in numbers in society, and there didn't seem to be any cure, and it just seemed like this mysterious death sentence that there was no help for. And I just knew there was something. I knew that there was something that we could do about it, and I was so determined to find that out. And my personal path has taken me through Ayurvedic training and school, which is all about preventative health care. And when you really get down to the root of it, it kind of becomes simple, but then so much more complex at the same time, because when you realize that it's not just one thing, it's the whole way that we're living our lives that needs to change. It's the lifestyle in general that keeps us sick.
Yeah.
It's kind of simple because then you understand the root. And then it's also not simple because you realize that you have to basically change everything about your life.
Right. Right.
And that's not easy.
It's not. It's not. And, there are so many pieces to it. And that's what I work with clients on is I really say it's the small shifts that lead to the biggest impact over time. I think, and I do have a number of clients that come to me after working with other providers who have had the experience, or, I know that it can be an experience of going to a provider and getting almost like a prescriptive food protocol and saying you have to follow this, then you will heal. But that really takes the intuitive aspect of eating out of it and putting the power outside of yourself for healing. And so my approach is always looking at what are you currently doing and what are just a couple shifts that we can make, because that is sustainable. When we're talking about lifestyle changes, uprooting everything all at once is just going to be a huge shock to the system. It's not going to be sustainable, maybe for a little bit of time. But if we can just shift, one aspect, or, just something about like the breakfast we're eating, just shift that a little bit of what we're already doing, or, the type of movement we're doing, then that's easy, because we don't have to totally reprogram the habits that are ingrained, because our habits are driven by kind of our subconscious mind. It's automatic. That's why it's easy. And so when we're reprogramming that, it's really a communication with our subconscious that we need to, and so if we're already doing something and we can just shift it, it's less of a toll on our bodies too, because we don't really have to think about it. And then we start seeing the changes. And so that's really my approach when it comes to the lifestyle change.
Yeah, that's a really good approach. And I think that's just a really good reminder to have for everyone, that it's really the small steps that lead to the big leaps. And when you really understand just what it requires to make that lifestyle change, and that it's not an overnight thing and you can't just do an overhaul all at once, it requires courage to basically embark on this journey and really stay devoted to your healing path. That's why I feel it's so beneficial and necessary to work with a preventative holistic practitioner, just such as yourself or myself, for an extended period of time, because it's not a quick fix. And true healing that is sustainable requires consistent work over a long period of time. And I think that's what really gets people the results, when they're serious about making those changes and they're willing to invest their energy in their own healing experience. And, like holistic practitioners usually tend to want to put the power back into the individual's hand and empower them to know how to take care of themselves. So even when you're not working with someone, you have that confidence and you know what to do to bring yourself back into alignment,
Absolutely. I always say it's like I'm providing you the tools so that you don't need me.
Definitely. And the support for a good amount of time, so that you can kind of like get the momentum going that's needed to keep it going.
Yes. Because I think sometimes with change, we think it's just going to be this like linear path or trajectory, and, any sort of slip ups or slide backs, that we're falling off or that we're failing. And I don't use those kind of, on off terminologies when it comes to food or changes, because there are things that we can learn in those like times where we view it as a slide back or falling off. It's what led us to that. What don't we like about it? What can we do differently next time? So I think there's a lot of like what you were talking about with the trauma and the pain, in any sort of mistakes or things that we view as slip ups. Those are, there's so much that we can learn in that if we didn't slide back, or, in our minds mess up or something, then we would have never learned, what what triggered that, what we could do differently. So there's so much power in that too.
Definitely. And that brings up the subject of what contrast really provides for us in the human experience. Is it, even when you're like, you don't feel good about something and it's uncomfortable, if you can sit consciously with your experience and realize that the contrast is still serving you, if anything, it's really showing you what it is that you don't want, so that you know with way more clarity what it is that you do want.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I love that.
One of the things that contrast really provides for us. And you're right, it's not a linear thing. It's like a spiral. We always have to like come back around to visit different layers and aspects and continuously work on it. And it's kind of like a dance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And the step back isn't necessarily bad, but that's where so many of us like trip up and like fall into that hole of just feeling like we're failing because we take that 1 step back. And that's another piece where that true self-mastery comes in, is being able to be conscious when you take that step back, knowing that it's a part of the process. Right. I think of it as like a rubber band. When you pull it back before it goes forward. So that kind of shift the mindset a little bit to feel okay when you're pulled back a little bit, knowing that what you're doing is really preparing for another step forward.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. Yeah, and I think the mindset piece is so important. I feel like it's so easy when it comes to health to get caught up in the good or bad, or put things into buckets that are on either one end of the spectrum or the other. And so a lot of what I work with too is on the relationship to food and to our bodies, and kind of moving out of this swinging back and forth of, going from one extreme to the other, and finding more of an ebb and flow in the middle. And that, I think, with any healing path or journey or goal that we have, there's this idea that like we will get there, and there is like this static end place. But when we realize it's it's an ebb and flow kind of in this in our center, and so that can really remove a lot of, I feel like, the stress of feeling like, well, when I fall off, that means I'm not on. It's it's not like you're trying to reach this one final end point. It's how to move, be fluid with the things that come in and out of your life.
Definitely. Well, and that brings me back to that piece that you mentioned about the intuitive aspect of not only eating but caring for your body, especially right now, because we're like so oversaturated with information. And I'm willing to bet that you could find an article that is for and against just about everything on the planet right now, especially when it comes to nutrition. And I think that's one of the things that really overwhelms people. I know I've been overwhelmed with that before, and that's when it gets super important to really hone in your personal discernment and intuition, and release the judgments and really start paying attention to the feedback from what your body is saying to you about what you're feeding it and what you're doing for it, because that's really the ultimate doctor for every person, is the wisdom of their own body. And I know for me personally, about 10 years ago, when I was just waking up to this, the need to follow this holistic path, I was so frustrated because I felt so disconnected from my body. I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to take care of it. I just was like so at a loss and devastated a lot of the times because I felt so disconnected from it, and like I couldn't understand what it was saying to me. And I just want to let anybody know who's watching this, if you're in that position, that you totally can shift that. And it's a journey like all of this. It takes time and devotion, your focus inward, and really paying attention to your body and listening to it. And over time, you begin to cultivate a deeper relationship with it, and it gets easier to read its signals and language, because the body doesn't speak to us in human words. It speaks to us in patterns and sensations, and we have to really start paying attention to patterns in our bodies and in our lives and the sensations. And it brings me back to something that you said just a few minutes ago about the correlation between the nervous system and the hormonal system and the physical body. And like, that's something that I think that allopathic medicine has yet to really integrate into their system of doing things, is like stress. That's not like a physical tangible thing, but it's like an energy and like an emotion that we experience and we feel that has an effect on our physical body. And that is just as important to consider when you're taking a holistic approach. Like, holistic, it's like the whole picture. It's not just a physical thing. You have to take into consideration where you're at in your life. This is one of the things that I loved about Ayurvedic training, was realizing that an Ayurvedic approach looks at your whole life. It looks at what could possibly be causing you stress. I remember when the doctor said that it wouldn't necessarily be totally off the wall for an Ayurvedic doctor to prescribe, like, their prescription for you is to quit the job that you have. Because if it's a job that's really bad for your health, not only physically, but if it's causing you stress, like, if you do all of the other things in your life, but you're not looking at that one piece that's unhealthy for you, like a toxic relationship or a job that's bad for your health, you're only going to be able to get so far. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. In functional medicine, there's an analogy of, you step on a tack and it's stuck in your foot, and kind of a conventional approach is to take like a painkiller for it. But what we want to do is get that tack out of the foot and not just dull the pain of it. What is causing it, not this approach of what is the symptom, treat the symptom, but ask why. And when it comes to our health and what you're saying, it's a combination of the things going on in our physical body. It could be the nutrition, it could be the nutrient that we need, but it's also what if that tack is that job or that relationship or that other thing. We really have to combine the mental, emotional pieces with the physical. Otherwise, we're going to be missing a part.
Definitely. That's a really useful analogy also. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually just recently learned about this, honestly, just a few months ago, the more I get into this menstrual cycle awareness work. And I'm really excited to be talking to Krista about this today, because it's something that I have been curious to learn about myself. And that is something called seed cycling. Would you mind explaining to us what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So seed cycling is the concept of incorporating a tablespoon each of pumpkin seeds and flax seeds during the first half of your menstrual cycle. So that would be day 1, which is the first day of your full bleed up until ovulation. And then switching over to a tablespoon each of sunflower seeds and sesame seeds. And so ideally you would want those to be ground so that you can break the outer shell to get the nutrients out so it's better absorbed. And so the idea behind seed cycling is to provide your body with the specific nutrients and healthy fats to support hormone balance. Ground flax, for example, has estrogen binding or balancing effects. And some of the seeds have nutrients like zinc and magnesium and B6, all which play an important role in our hormonal balance. And so that idea of switching them, you know, when we look to the science, there isn't an exact study on this exact act of swapping the seeds at that each point in the cycle, but there are studies on the specific seeds and the effects on the hormone system. Mm-hmm. And so it's something where, you know, applied and anecdotally with my clients and even personally have found, you know, really great effects. And so whether that is the exact, you know, swapping at that exact time, or is it just that we are incorporating these hormone, you know, healthy, supportive foods in general, you know, who's to say? But if it works, you know, that's kind of the piece of tapping into your body. How is it affecting your body? And so if it works, great. It's a really great food-based approach to incorporate in, you know. And so one of the things that the most common effect that I see is somebody who's struggling with maybe a bit of either a missing cycle or a bit of irregularity or a long cycle. Maybe it's going into like, you know, into the 30-ish number of days mark, you know, mid 30 range, longer, you know, irregular cycles, meaning it's just consistent, not consistent, you know, around like a, you know, certain, you know, average is 28 days, but anywhere from, you know, 25 to 35 is normal. 21 to 35, but, you know, if we're kind of in that low end of 20, I kind of like to, you know, say mid 20s, but more regularity with the cycle and just a bit less symptomatic. And so that is, you know, something that is helpful to incorporate as a piece of, you know, all of these other things that we've been talking about.
Awesome. So I wonder, I'm not sure if you know or not, but I wonder where seed cycling comes from, because I have a feeling that's been around for a long time. And even though it hasn't had like any legitimate scientific research to back it, I feel like that is a piece of wisdom that came from women and that they've been.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that I would need to look into the history of it a bit more as well. But yeah, it's so great that, you know, these different, you know, if it is an ancient practice, then, you know, that we're kind of refinding these now as so much menstrual cycle awareness is coming up now, and so many people are getting in tune with their cycles and wanting to understand the different phases and really, you know, understanding the hormone cycle, like that, you know, female bodies are cyclical. We operate on this 28-day cycle that is so like how it's aligned with the moon cycle. Is that a coincidence? You know, it's just like so amazing. And we're forcing our bodies into following this kind of like really rigid 24-hour day cycle, and just kind of like this like linear go and that's really masculine energy, and not saying that that's like men or women or gender. It's just like a masculine approach, and the feminine, and we all have masculine and feminine, and it's not saying that we need to we just need to integrate all parts of ourselves, and tapping into that cyclical wisdom is just part of that feminine energy that we've kind of lost for a while, but so many of us are waking back up to.
And thank goodness, because
Right.
It's not a wonder why so many, not only women, but everyone in general suffers, because we've been disconnected from that cyclical side of nature, and it makes us who we are. You know, we're made of the same material that the earth is made of, and that's how she functions. So it makes sense for us to function in cycles as well. I just can only imagine what our world would be like if everyone was back in tune and respecting and abiding by the cyclical aspect of life, it would be a totally different world.
Definitely.
Okay, so I just want to clarify the seed cycling, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So it is pumpkin seed and flax seed?
Pumpkin and flax during the first half, and then sunflower seeds and sesame seeds in the second half. So what I like to say is for sesame seeds, tahini is a good kind of swap out, since that is ground sesame seeds. So that's kind of an easy one to incorporate there. You do want them, if possible, to be ground, and kind of best gold standard is to grind them yourself, just because the fats can oxidize and kind of essentially go bad. But that's not always, a realistic thing to, have the time to be grinding all these seeds. So I personally buy pre-ground flax, keep it in the fridge. You can keep it in the freezer as well. And, if you were to not grind some of them, the pumpkin seeds and the sunflower seeds, those ones are bigger seeds than the flax or the sesame. So those ones are kind of easy to kind of sprinkle on top of things or add into smoothies, top on bowls, really just kind of any meal that you're having, kind of pretty neutral taste to just incorporate. But if you do something like a smoothie or an oatmeal bowl or something in the morning, they're really easy to kind of just incorporate into something. That's an example. Incorporate into something you're already doing instead of making it its own thing. You have to remember.
Perfect. Okay. And was that 1 tablespoon?
1 tablespoon of each. Yes.
Each. Okay. 1 tablespoon. Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to have to rewatch this and write that down. Okay. So I want to know what, from your experience working with people, are some of the main issues that you see when it comes to menstrual cycle and imbalances?
Yeah. So I see kind of a wide variety, almost like any menstrual cycle irregularity. So a lot of symptoms would be, PMS, cramps, bloating, those types of acne is a big one as well, skin issues. And then really any sort of menstrual irregularity, whether it's a short cycle, a long cycle, a heavy period, a light period, that those can all mean different things, but really a lot of those symptoms I just mentioned, the period pain is common. I see a lot of PCOS, endometriosis, which that is characterized by pretty extreme period pain. That is where parts of the endometrium or the uterine lining start growing in other places outside of the uterus where it should be. And since those are responsive to estrogen, and estrogen is a growth hormone that helps to grow the uterine lining, like I mentioned, during the first half of the cycle, then really it can cause a lot of pain if that is happening elsewhere in the body. So that would be something, if you're experiencing really, really, really terrible pain, to check that with your doctor. But that, and then gut issues as well. So our gut health is so tightly tied in with our hormone or with our hormone system. All systems in the body are connected, but what I work with primarily is the hormones and the gut health, and a lot of times seeing those overlapping. So really any sort of gut issue, but I work with a lot of primarily IBS, and so that would just be any sort of stomach pain, indigestion, bloating, just bowel irregularities, and so that. And then I mentioned the relationship with our food and body. So while we may have all these things going on in our physical body, maybe things that we've gone through in life, we've kind of gotten a rocky relationship with ourselves or with food, and so that kind of layers into it. So how can we heal these things showing up in the body while fostering a healthy relationship with food and ourselves?
Yeah, that food piece is a big one.
Yes.
Like one of the easiest and main things that collectively we reach for comfort.
Yes.
I think it would even be a totally different ballgame if all we had access to was real whole foods. But when you throw in the chemical shitstorm, excuse my language, for lack of a better term, that is in so much of the processed, pre-made food, it really starts to like mess up the chemistry of your body. And then that makes it even more challenging to know what your body needs and what it doesn't. And that's why I personally always find doing some type of like cleansing or detoxing to like get that type of stuff out, to kind of like reset your systems, that you can actually receive accurate feedback from your body, and really be able to understand better what it needs, I think is an important piece to the whole holistic approach. Is just, cleaning your system is part of getting it into balance, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a lot of the disconnection too can just happen from, just our diet culture that we live in. We are sold this idea, again, going back to the thing that will, quote, fix us or heal us is outside of us, and we can get lost in that it's in this diet or this way of eating. And so then we end up putting these food rules and restrictions on ourselves, and then when we don't follow it, or we say we can't have the cake and we're at the birthday party and we have it, then that's when our mind is, our kind of worst enemy. It's, you failed, how could you do this? And then we're just so mean to ourselves when it comes to that. And
Totally.
but it's just kind of the diet culture that we live in that sells us the idea that we have to follow this certain way of eating. This way of eating is the best, the end all be all, but that really separates from our intuitive aspects of food. And we definitely need to have an understanding of food and nutrients and what supports our body, and when in intuitive eating, that is kind of our outer wisdom. We need to have that, but what we've really lost connection with a lot of times is the inner wisdom of what do I want, what sounds good in this moment. And that can almost sound like, what do you mean, what do I want? Does it follow the rule that I have? And so it's a lot of reconnecting to that inner piece.
Yeah, that's a really important piece. There is a basic rule of thumb that I learned from a teacher. It's a piece of Ayurvedic wisdom. It's just intuitive. So much of preventative health is intuitive when you really start getting into it. But this one helped me kind of like feel better about like times when you do want treats that aren't necessarily the best for you, just to like give yourself permission. Like a 70-30 rule, and I'm sure there's like a variation in percentage, but it's like basically eat for nutrition 70% of the time, and 30% of the time eat for pleasure or joy.
Yes. Yeah. And so those foods like you're mentioning, I never call them bad because they're not, because they give us joy. And I say joy is a nutrient too. And so
Totally.
It's when we don't give ourselves permission that we end up with this strained relationship with food. And so then the times where we have it, we end up in this mentality of, this is the last time I can ever have this. I better have more now because I'm not allowed to have it tomorrow. And so that is where the unintentional overdoing it can happen. And if we just give ourselves the permission, and the permission to enjoy it too. One of the worst terms to me is guilty pleasure, because why are we putting guilt on our pleasure? And so that is something I try to reframe if I hear it, because we shouldn't have guilt when it comes to enjoying something.
Definitely. I completely agree. And I think that is another really important piece that societally we have been lacking, because we've been stuck in this artificial production mode, which doesn't really honor rest time or even play time. And I think that's one of the things that so many adults and even children now are missing, that like can make such a big difference in the whole picture, is like in having more enjoyment, having more fun and pleasure, and whatever way that is. That's so often what we need, especially when we're just not feeling our best. Oftentimes it's because we're not enjoying enough of our life. We're not having enough pleasure or enough time to play. And so many of us get so serious, especially on the healing journey. It's so easy to get wrapped up in fixing ourselves and doing all the things and healing ourselves. And that's such an important piece to incorporate, is making sure even on the healing journey that you unplug from the work of healing and just let yourself enjoy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even when it comes to food and eating, it's, there can become a point where we get too absorbed in aspects of, clean eating or doing it perfectly, or having these like, it can turn into orthorexia, or, a unhealthy relationship with food in the ways that, we wouldn't think of it as before. This is a relatively new diagnosis, but orthorexia is kind of that unhealthy obsession with clean eating. And it's, if anything starts interfering with your joy and your kind of ability to kind of live life in an enjoyable way, not going to the restaurant because it doesn't have the food that you feel okay with. Those are things to check in and to check in with as well, because those ones are a little bit more sneaky and can come in when we are on this healing journey. Like you said, if we don't unplug and say, well, I can't have that because that doesn't fit into my healing plan, that's something to make sure to stay in tune with as well.
Definitely. I have had my own experiences with that. I didn't really have like a legitimate mentor for most of my own healing experience, and I didn't really have anybody to reflect that back to me and help me find some balance with that. And that has been one of the most challenging things for me personally, is kind of letting go of some of that control.
Absolutely.
And trusting that I'm still going to be okay, and it's not going to totally ruin all of my progress. But that's like really where it gets messy and challenging sometimes, because of our food culture and how it's culturally accepted to eat garbage and not take care of ourselves, because that's not what our culture has taught us or raised us into. And especially if you don't really have a supportive community around you that wants to be healthy and eat healthy and take care of themselves, it can be really challenging when it's a solo journey. But you do reach a point after a while where you've been doing it enough, and you can trust that you're gonna be able to bring yourself back into alignment, even when you choose to be social and indulge in things that you don't normally do. Eventually there becomes a deeper level of trust that you got this, you're going to be okay, and this is your new lifestyle, even if you do choose to indulge sometimes. So
yeah, absolutely. I think the two things that you said that are so important are the trust, in those situations. Maybe in the past you didn't trust yourself, or it was kind of caught up in rules. So if you fall off, you're just off, that mindset piece. But the control piece of, I think that's what a lot of us are healing from, or the control. And I know for me, for a while, with everything, with losing my mom and the pain of that, what I turned to was alcohol. And I have, since let that go, and it's no longer a part of my life. But that was a way for, because I've always been someone who's kind of more this like type A, keep everything in control. And when kind of the pain became too much, alcohol was a way to numb that and to let go of control, because nothing else really could, you know, release that control. And when that, you know, wasn't working for me anymore, and I don't look back on that time with like shame and what was I doing, because that was the tool I had at that time. I didn't have other tools, but you know, then that's gone. And so then it can be really easy to jump into controlling everything or controlling these new aspects of your life. And so it is sometimes like this game of whack-a-mole of the, what am I controlling? What am I using to release that control? How can I find balance? So I think that's kind of part of the never-ending journey with health and healing.
Definitely. And I really appreciate the fact that you don't look at that chapter of your life with shame, because I'm sure that you were doing the best that you could, and dealing with the loss of a loved one, let alone your mother, is massive. And I just want to put it out there for anyone watching this that regardless of how you're dealing with things, just believe that you're doing your best, and try not to add more guilt to it, because sometimes we don't necessarily choose the healthiest coping mechanism, but it might be necessary in that instance to drink, to let go of control for a moment, as long as you don't stay in that and drowned in it, as long as you bring yourself out of it. Sometimes I think that's really important, to release shame around the way that we have chosen to cope with things, because we're up against a lot of toxicity and imbalance in every layer of life right now, where we're at on the planet right now. There's a massive amount of healing that needs to take place, and most of us don't really have the medicine of community that we need to help support us to get through things, amongst all of the other things that really are needed for a human being to be whole and healthy. We don't have that culturally. We don't have a lot of that. So to practice forgiveness for whatever way that you choose to cope with things, and to just don't let that be your, you know, like your end result of everything, and to find the strength to pull yourself out of it eventually, and be okay with however you coped with things whenever you needed to, I think is really important.
Yeah, and it's important that sometimes, a lot of times, we don't really choose these coping mechanisms, but we just don't have the tools or know otherwise.
Definitely.
Like I mentioned, I didn't really know other ways to deal with things, and I didn't even know while I was in it that that's what was happening. Like, oh, I'm numbing this pain of what happened to me all this time ago, and I'm using this for that. You know, it's until you're kind of like, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. And I was talking about this quote yesterday, and I can't remember where I learned it, but when the pain of staying the same becomes bigger than the pain of change, that's when, you know,
Definitely.
you're ready to move out of it.
Definitely. And then that's where we have to choose to let ourselves grow.
Absolutely.
Even though growth is really uncomfortable and painful sometimes. But
but it's worth it.
Yes. Okay, so I just wanted to rewind a little bit and come back to the piece about gut health, because that's not really something that I've talked too much about in this series. And I would love to talk a little bit more about that. And maybe if you could provide some tips for people that want to really start taking better care of their gut health.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of the things that we've been talking about that can affect the hormone system and our nervous system are kind of at the root cause of our gut problems as well. So our stress and our lifestyle, toxic environment, and then, you know, a lot of different food sensitivities and intolerances and allergies, if we're eating something that is kind of contributing to our symptoms, that can sometimes be related to, you know, various stressors and things that have impacted our gut health. Or another big one is kind of long-term antibiotic use, altering our gut microbiome, which our gut microbiome is really just the balance of bacteria. And we have a bunch of beneficial bacteria that live in our guts, but antibiotics can really alter that good balance. And so if our good bacteria are getting wiped out, because the antibiotics will clear out the good and the bad, it doesn't really differentiate. And, you know, so if our good bacteria is not there, then there can be an overgrowth of not so good bacteria. There's a ringing, I'm sorry. And sorry about that. And so we can have an overgrowth of not so good bacteria. There can be underlying gut infections. And so just all of these different things that are altering our ability to properly digest and absorb our food. And so our food is really our building blocks. It's where we get the nutrients that we need from food to build everything in our body, our hormones, our mood chemicals, our muscle, you know, everything. And so if our gut is altered in a way where we're not digesting and absorbing those nutrients well, then that's when other imbalances can happen, because we just don't have the building blocks that we need. So a lot of times we hear so much like everything starts in the gut, or a lot of things can be traced back to the gut. A lot of our immune system is housed in the gut, which makes sense because our gut is really everything, all the way from our mouth all the way through the intestines. And so it's how things enter our body and leave our body. And so our intestinal system and a lot of our immune system's there because it's kind of our body's like first line of defense of a lot of these things that come in, you know, through food or things we're eating or drinking. And so what we want to do is make sure, you know, first identify if, you know, things that we're eating are contributing to potentially any of our symptoms. And then just really, it all kind of comes down to like, are we getting a balance of what we need? So, you know, enough protein is needed for kind of healing. We need protein for healing anything that is, you know, lowering inflammation as well. So protein and our healthy fats, enough fiber. So that is one that maybe a lot of us aren't getting enough of, is fiber. So that is kind of the bulk part of our plant foods. It's not digested by our bodies, but it provides food for the beneficial gut bacteria in the gut. So getting just a variety of plant foods to provide that fiber. So our fruits, vegetables, grains, things like that. And probiotic foods. So there are certain foods that provide probiotics. So doing like yogurt or kefir, or doing a non-dairy option if dairy doesn't work for your body. Fermented vegetables. So, and then also something that I see a lot is low stomach acid. And so that the root of that, a lot of times it can be stress. It can be some of those other underlying things that we talked about in the gut, but supporting our stomach acids really important because it plays a big role in the digestion of our food as well. So there are some supplements that can help with that, but apple cider vinegar is one that can really help as well. So those are just a couple tips to incorporate.
Beautiful. Did you by chance happen to have a visual of any of that?
For the gut health,
if you don't, I just figured I would ask.
Yeah, let me, I might be able to pull one up.
And thank you for sharing that. I've actually just been getting into making homemade kraut.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet myself, but yeah, I would love to.
It's so easy to make. It's so easy and inexpensive, and yeah, my body just loves it. I've also been making lots of kombucha.
Oh, yeah, my sister started doing that.
That one's pretty fun too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Um,
I've been recently wanting to get into making yogurt, but I haven't
yeah.
done that.
Yeah, I haven't done that one yet either. That one seems to be pretty simple to do. I just haven't tried that one yet myself.
Yeah.
So I do have a visual. Let me see here. Okay, so just pulled it up from my Instagram, but just a few ways to support healthy gut. So
Hmm.
here we have, I put lemon here because that is, doing some warm lemon water in the morning can help support digestion. Vitamin D is really low in a lot of people, especially if we're living in parts of the world where we don't get sunlight year round.
Yeah.
Turmeric is a root spice. It looks a lot like ginger.
Yeah.
We can get it in powdered form as well, but turmeric is a really potent anti-inflammatory. And
Love.
so, yeah, that one's really great to incorporate. Quality protein, like I mentioned, if we have any sort of inflammation or just need any sort of healing in the body, we need, enough protein for healing. The apple cider vinegar that I mentioned, the fermented foods, like we were just talking about, lowering caffeine, that is, can be helpful for some people if caffeine is acidic. So if it's contributing to any sort of indigestion, again, that's something that, we want to check in with our own bodies to see, is that contributing for me? Realized I had a little typo there. So do you know that caffeine has an E there? I just saw that.
Oh, I totally.
Bone broth. And so bone broth and collagen, they both have, they're a good source of protein, but specifically our proteins are made from amino acids, which are building blocks of protein. I like to think of them like little Lego pieces. And so, but our collagen and our bone broth specifically have some amino acids that are helpful for supporting the gut, like L-glutamine is one of them. L-glutamine is one that may be supplemented on its own for helping healing and sealing the gut lining. Digestive bitters are basically just different types of bitter herbs that can help to support digestion in the same way like the apple cider vinegar I was talking about, to support the stomach acid production. Identifying the trigger foods. So some common ones would be like our wheat or gluten, dairy, soy, nuts. So it can really, we can experience a true food allergy, which is something where pretty much immediately or right when we eat something, we notice a food, symptom, or something, it could be a little more prolonged, like the next day or later on. So just identifying, potentials for you, the fiber we talked about, and just being mindful with sugar.
Are you suggesting that we all eat chocolate?
Yes. Actually, our 70% or higher dark chocolate is a really great source of magnesium and can be really helpful in the luteal phase, or during kind of our PMS time right before our periods. And so we hear, like, oh, crave chocolate. Well, our dark chocolate's actually a good source of nutrients like magnesium that can be helpful. So yes.
Beautiful. I love chocolate. Any excuse to eat it. And I'm totally getting ready to bleed soon. So I'm going to go get some chocolate after we.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for sharing that visual and for sharing all of your, some of your knowledge and wisdom. You seem like a very well-educated and experienced woman. And I'm grateful to be sharing you with the audience of the summit.
Yeah, me too. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to participate.
Yay. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to ask you if you could share a little bit about your services.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with clients virtually. So for anybody located within the US, I do virtual nutrition coaching and also offer at-home hormone and gut health testing. So a lot of what we were talking about, those are great, really comprehensive tests that help you get to the root of your symptoms. And then we integrate that into nutrition and lifestyle coaching tailored to your body. So that's really the coaching piece. And then I have my online course, which is my Heal Your Period course. And so this is a great self-guided approach. So everything that I really would go over if we were to work one-on-one together, wrapped up into a course that you can complete on your own time. And the great part is that this is available to anybody worldwide. So since I can only work with clients in the US, unfortunately, just due to licensing, this really opens that up to people who want the information and in a way that they can complete it in their own way.
Beautiful. Is that the course that you are offering a discount on?
Yes. So 20% off discount to all participants here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for offering that. That sounds like a great course. You got a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think that just about does it for us. If there's not anything else that you want to cover before we get off here.
No, I think we covered it all.
Yeah, I think so too. So, okay. Thank you so much for your time, Krista. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode. I will be providing you guys with a link for that discount if you want to look into that course. And I will give you her contact information so that you can get a hold of her if you need to. And definitely recommend following her on Instagram. She's always posting really informative content similar to what she just showed us. So I will link everybody up, and I think that's about it. So I hope everyone has a beautiful day.
Thank you so much.
Another episode. See you later, Krista.
Bye.